This episode of Youth Culture Matters is sponsored in part by Judson College. It's that time of year between Thanksgiving and Christmas when so many of us are watching and talking about our favorite holiday movies. And as with all things in life, Christians need to think differently about movies. What is it that makes a movie good? What can movies tell us about the human condition? And how can we use movies in our homes and ministries to advance the gospel? Stick with us as we engage in a winsome, fun, and informative conversation about movies with our movie-loving friend John Perritt on this episode of Youth Culture Matters.
From the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding, this is Youth Culture Matters. If you're a parent, youth worker, educator, counselor, grandparent, or anyone else who cares about kids, we're glad you've joined us for this practical, informative, and hope-filled podcast. This is a place where together we talk and think Christianly about the rapidly changing world of today's children, teens, and young adults.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Youth Culture Matters. I'm Walt Mueller here at the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding, and this is our long-form podcast. In case you're not aware, we have two other podcasts. Kyle Hoffsmith hosts a podcast called The Word in Youth Ministry. You can find that at cpyu.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And then we have a one-minute daily podcast. It's called Youth Culture Today. It's been running as a radio show for I think 18 or 19 years now around North America, and we put it up on our site, and it's now a podcast. You're able to get it and listen to it, and so we invite you to tune into that as well. Subscribe to these youth workers. These are not only for you. Push these on to your parents. This is just a great way for you to support them. So we're happy we're able to do these here. And I need to say thank you to Judson College for sponsoring this episode of Youth Culture Matters. And if you go to our website and scroll down underneath the player for this particular episode, you will find a link to learn more about Judson College. So thank you to those folks for doing that. Well, today, this is going to be great because, part of our history here at CPYU is we got started early on, 35 years ago, spending a lot of time looking at, listening to, sitting through things like music video, music, film, television shows, and translating that, looking for worldview messages that are there, thinking about are there things we can celebrate, are there things we need to talk about, how can we engage with our kids on these things, what does it mean to become someone who moves from a posture of, basically mindless consumption to one of mindful critique, thinking Christianly about film, thinking Christianly about music. We have a lot of resources here. We may talk about those later that will help you do that and help you teach students to do that. But what's been fun for me over the years of doing this has been running into people who just think the same way and are helpful with this. And so today we're going to have a conversation with my buddy John Perritt. John and I have known each other for, I don't know, how long has it been, John?
That's a good question, Walt.
About 20 years maybe or more?
Probably close.
Yeah. And I think our first encounter was you had me down at your church in Jackson, or was it at Southern Seminary? Which came first? The seminary or the church?
Let's see.
Yeah,
the church first, because you came twice to our church, and you came, the first time is when I met you, and then Southern in between that, and then you came back.
Right, yeah, and I came into Southern. You were doing your doctorate of ministry there. I came into the classroom for a couple of days, and I remember there were a lot of things you and I talked about. We really clicked, and one of the things we talked about was movies, film, that sort of thing. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I do want to say we have unleashed Chris Wagner from behind all of the controls here in the studio, and we're going to invite him in to participate in, co-host, however you want to entertain us, perhaps, as we talk about film.
Hey, I got control of the mute button, so
that's right.
I might just mute you entirely.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, and I've got
power's already going to his
That's
head.
exactly right. Now I've got control of your job, so just keep that in mind. So I think it's good to have Chris, because any of you who know Chris, if you know Chris, you know if you look up the word quirky in the dictionary, Chris's picture is in there. And he's got a lot of buttons to push, and when they get pushed and he goes off, it's pretty funny. I don't know if that's going to happen today or not, but I figured let's invite him in, because as we talk about movies and the role of film in our lives and how to, view films as a family and some of the things John's doing with movies, I thought it would be fun. This is going to be a fun episode, I'm sure, and it'll be practical as well, because we're going to get to a point where we pick John's brain on some of the things that he's teaching people about how to watch movies, especially as a family. This new Substack you have, right? Family Movie Night. And we'll include a link to that and hear more about that in a little bit. But first, it's always fun to get to know the people who run the podcast. I wish we're going to do this sometime, Chris. I thought about this last night, in the middle of the night when I woke up. I thought, I wish we had our phones wired in here. We could randomly call some of our youth ministry friends and just throw a question at them. And we don't have
that. We can work that out.
We're going to do that
next time.
Yeah, we're going to do that at some point. Just surprise people and ask them questions. But I shot these guys a couple of questions, and maybe there were more. Maybe John, you want to shoot us a question and make us think about, or Chris, the same thing. But movies. So let's talk about this. One of the questions I had was, and I tried to come up with this for myself, what are your top 5 movies of all time for you personally? And we don't want to, one of the things that's very annoying, and we don't want to go into this, is when someone tells you about a movie they watched, and the description and the narrative on the movie is actually longer than the movie itself. And it's just monotone dialogue. One-way dialogue, and you're not seeing anything. And by the way, how do you escape? How do you escape from that? I don't know how. When somebody starts, I just don't know how to escape from that kind of conversation. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. John, have you figured out how to do that? If somebody starts to tell you the whole doggone film?
No. I don't like spoilers. That's for sure. If someone's going to give it away.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's a way to interject. If you can kind of tell they're droning on, you can just say, hey, I don't want to hear spoilers, so I kind of like to be surprised. And maybe that's a way where you can kind of shut them down a little bit.
I feel like anytime I've actually tried that method, they end up telling the spoiler part. They're like, oh, no, don't worry, I won't ruin it for you. And then they go on to ruin it.
Yeah.
So,
If the conversation starts like this, hey, I just watched this great series of films, the Godfather films, I want to tell you about them. Buckle up. I mean, you just stop right there and you leave, right? Anything that's long like that. So, yeah. So, all right. So, all right. Do you want to go first, John? Your top 5 movies. We're leaning into you today as the movie expert. So, I kind of feel like you, Chris, whatever Chris comes up with, people might tune out.
That's true.
And I don't want Chris to go first, but then again, Chris, probably what you're going to come up with, you're going to redeem everything. So, yeah, go ahead.
And I'll tell you now, John, my list I could not limit it to 5, so I don't want you to feel limited to 5 either. But
well, we're going to limit it to 5.
Well,
so
I feel like I want to preface with a lot of things. First, I just want to say, because I didn't get to say this, thanks for having me back on. Really appreciate always what you guys are doing, and just appreciate the opportunity to come back on. Second, I don't feel like I'm an expert in any of this, so I'm definitely right alongside you guys of trying to figure this out and talk about it. So I don't want to start this podcast like, I'm going to have the answers. And then the other thing is, I actually didn't see the questions that you sent in the email until I got on this. So I was kind of jotting some stuff down.
Okay. Do you want me to give you a pass for a couple of minutes, or?
Well, I'll go ahead and say my number one, because that one's been pretty consistent. I always say Braveheart is my favorite movie of all time. Partially, it was one of the earlier R-rated movies that I got to see in the theater, and I went with my father. And so I think just some of that, getting to experience it with my dad, And I mean, it's just, to me, it's such an awesome film. I mean, it's beautiful. I know it's not historically accurate. I mean, Mel Gibson even said, as he was the director and star, and I know Randall Wallace wrote the screenplay, but I think Mel Gibson kind of had some input in that. And so it wasn't set out to be a historically accurate film, even though it's based on real characters in history. But yeah, I mean, just amazing story, amazing action. I watched it recently with my oldest son, and I realized as I was watching it, it was the first time I was watching it as a father.
Mm.
And there are some scenes that hit you totally different after you have children in that movie. So, anyway, that's my number one.
All right.
I can go there.
Yeah. All right. We're going to come back to you for 2 through 5.
Okay.
Chris, number 1, what do you got?
My favorite movie of all time, and it has been for a while, is called The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. It's a 1966 film featuring Don Knotts. It's a classic in my mind. I'll say this about a lot of the movies that kind of came to mind is some of these aren't necessarily the best movies. Like some on my list, there are movies that are definitely better than, but kind of like what John said, there's certain, whether it be a time in your life or who you watch it with. John, you mentioned watching with your dad. Sometimes the memories associated with the movie or the things going on in your life when you saw it or the people you were with when you saw it, those things sometimes, bump a movie up the list, even if
Absolutely.
It's not the number one, best movie of all time kind of thing.
For sure.
Ghost and Mr. Chicken.
Yeah.
I love the comedy and the humor. That's my style of humor.
I'm going to ask for a show of hands, everyone who's listening, who's watched A Ghost and Mr. I don't see any hands, Chris. This does not surprise me.
I've definitely heard of
this
it.
Is
I'll
actually,
say that. I've heard of it.
No, I will say I'll raise my hand because I've seen it. And when I was a kid, it was not unusual for us to load up in the car and go to the drive-in. We were a thrifty family. That's a nice way of saying my dad was cheap. We always talked about that. And getting to the he never put us in the trunk to get us in there. I mean, he paid to get us in, but we would go in the car. And I remember watching The Ghost of Mr. Chicken in the drive-in probably when I was about 10 or 11 years old. So, you came through. You came through with the quirky stuff, but
right.
I'm also embarrassed to say I know what that movie is, and I watched it. So now that you said it, I'm going to have to watch it again. For me, it's going to be, Chris, you might know what my favorite movie is. I mean, I think we've talked about, did a whole podcast episode on this.
When
Do you remember back?
I'm sure I'll remember. But...
Well, The Breakfast Club.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I just watched that with.
Great movie.
You like that one, John?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just watched that again. 40. I think next year is the 40th anniversary of that, and I just watched it again with all my students up in Canada. In the Coalition for Youth Ministry Excellence, we watched it and worked through it, and so, I mean, it sticks. It still resonates, and it still captures the realities of, different kids and what they've been through. It's striking. I will say, if you watch it again, one of the things we focused on with our students that they picked up on, which I was really pleased by, is just the opening few minutes where the students arrive for detention. And watching the interactions or lack thereof with whoever's dropping them off and the type of vehicle that they're in, which is indicative of who they are and, their lives. So that's really a good one. Yeah, Breakfast Club. I love that one, and I make a point of watching it every year.
Well, just to put a finer point on that too, I watched that with my oldest daughter, who's 17, and she loved it. And so you just think of, a 17-year-old today watching that, and it still resonates. It's just, something that's evergreen for sure.
And if you, here's, I mean, we'll get into this a little more about how to watch movies with students. One of the things about film, and I think that film in particular, which could be really helpful with our students, is and I would always say you get permission from parents to sit and watch this with students. You don't want to undercut the authority of a parent who's saying, I'm not letting my kid watch that or that type of film. But it's beneficial to watch. But to watch it together and then ask the question, how true does it hold today? That's the first question. That's just to kind of ease them into being open about answering questions. And the second one is it's diagnostic. It's like, where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself in any of these characters? And if so, how and who? Or who and how? And that'll really open your eyes to some of the things that your kids are feeling. I still cry when I watch that scene with, John Bender, when he is giving the narrative about his relationship with his dad in particular and what his home life is like. I mean, that is a powerful, powerful scene and performance. Okay, John, let's come back to you. Give us whatever you've got. If you have 4 more, that'd be great. And then then we'll go to Chris.
Quick interjection. Walt, and Chris, did you see the documentary Brats that came out within the last year?
I have not.
Yeah, you should check it out. It's about the Brat Pack, so it has a lot of the
the
Breakfast
backstory.
Club. Yeah. And so just kind of, when they were labeled the Brat Pack, just how that kind of ruined some of their careers. Emilio Estevez and Demi Moore and Judd Nelson, all those people. So anyway, if you grew up in that time, you might be interested in watching that. It's on Hulu.
Okay.
Okay. So some that I jotted down. This one I would say for sure is a top 5 is Shawshank Redemption.
Oh yeah, I do like that. Yeah.
That one again saw in high school, and it's just remained one that I absolutely love. Some of these I'm still not sure if they're top 5, but they're some of my favorite. Good Will Hunting. That one's very rough language. I mean, it's pretty filthy, from that perspective. But that really kind of launched Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's careers. They wrote and directed that. No, I'm sorry, they wrote it. But that's one that, I returned to. Moneyball is one I was surprised how much I like that, and I'm surprised how much I've rewatched that movie. But it's, so good. The Social Network is another one. I just think not only just because you kind of have some background on Facebook, and I know it's Mark Zuckerberg kind of says it's not accurate, but it's also written by it's the story of, I'm forgetting
the creators, right?
Yeah, one of the co-creators. And so I just think it's a fascinating story. I love David Fincher. He's the director, screenwriter. I'm just going blank on the screenwriter's name. But anyway, it's just, you think of how much, we talk about social media and technology all the time, how it's shaped our culture. Well, here's kind of the history of it, but it's told in a just incredibly stylistic way. It's great.
Yeah, so, that one's a bit older, but that's a good one to show to parents. Recommend a parents watch. Yeah,
there's some questionable content, and so youth leaders, parents, whoever's listening, just kind of that disclaimer.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Quirk.
All right. I will say I love the movie Cinderella. I'm a sucker for it.
This is
part of that is my grandparents didn't have cable, and I could watch 2 things at my grandparents' house. One was Mr. Ed, a TV show on recorded VHS tapes. And
it's just getting better.
And the other was Cinderella. And so I don't know why, but I'm a sucker for Cinderella. The story's only so, but I do think that the chubby mouse Gus, he's one of my favorite little side characters of all time. I love that.
You named your first dog after him, didn't you?
I did. I named yep, my wife and I named our first dog after him. There's a whole collection of the Steve Martin type of movie, movies in that, not just Steve Martin, but character, actors of that age, and
like Martin Short.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I would be tempted to throw any number of those movies in there, but my favorite of that kind of genre time frame is The Jerk.
I knew you were going to say that. I was going to blurt it out, but I thought I'm going to give him a shot here.
Oh yes, I love The Jerk. I think that's hilarious. Kind of action wise, I loved the movie Inception. That was a movie that I like. You got your brain kind of tickled a little bit, and had some cool kind of mind games, if you will, in that movie. Yeah, I don't know how to narrow it down. I'm just going to quickly say a couple others. I love The Big Lebowski. I love The Princess Bride, Tombstone, and then I'll throw one more wild card out there. The
They've all been wild cards.
March of the Penguins, the documentary that was had Morgan Freeman as the voiceover.
Yeah.
I loved that thing.
I think Duffy Robbins loves that film.
Yeah, I love it. So
John,
that was me keeping my list short.
Yeah. Can you profile Chris? Can you help me understand him based on that list?
Well, one, I mean, I just love that some obscure ones, and even, I mean, referencing Gus Gus, that is such a good character. It's like I forgot about him, and that's such a, I mean, I know Cinderella's a classic, but that you're willing to share these, even though you know Walt's going to make fun of you.
I know. I'm opening myself up to all kinds of ridicule, but
no, those are some. I mean, that's some spectrum there. I mean, you know, thrown in Inception and Christopher Nolan, which makes me realize, you know, the Dark Knight trilogy I have to put on there. That's, you know, the best.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And this is what I love about Chris. I mean, this is exactly what I expected. And I'm expecting more as we go through this, Chris. But, this is exactly what I expected. Oh, man. That's pretty good, though. I love that and it's so diverse. You know, it's just all over the place.
Yep.
But, yeah. All right. By the way, I said 5.
I know. I told you I wasn't going to get.
I think I went over.
Don't
5
ever
too,
come after me for going too long. All right. Don't ever do that again. I've listened to that for how many years now? 20? Has it been 20 years? Okay.
So I messed up once, and I.
That's the way it works.
Okay. All right.
I like that movie, Unforgiven. Is there a movie called Unforgiven? There's got to be one.
I think there is.
We'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Clint Eastwood.
Okay. All right. All right, so let me give you mine real quick, and this is in no general order. I'm going to affirm what you said, John. Good Will Hunting, man, that thing. I like movies that rock me, you know, to the core emotionally, in terms of the human struggles, particularly as they relate to kids. And I think a lot of that is just because of being in youth ministry, and it opens my eyes. And you know, every time I watch these, it's an emotional moment. In the same way, Little Miss Sunshine, which really was, you know, an amazing film in so many ways. And all these we actually would watch with students, you know, and deconstruct them and talk about them. Fight Club, man, that one.
David Fincher.
Yeah, you know, and I'll just tell you about that. I was in San Diego for a National Youth Workers Convention, and some of the folks who were listening who were privy to going there every year. We had one in San Diego, and at the Town and Country, the famous Town and Country, and you would walk under the elevated railway there and go to the big mall, and there was a movie theater there. Fight Club had come out, and so I skipped some sessions with my buddy who used to work with us here, Tom Petrosky, who actually teaches like media studies and film. Some of you remember Tom, big tall Tom, Big Tom. And we went to watch that. We skipped out on sessions, not my sessions where I was speaking, but we skipped out. And when it was over, we just, like, the lights came up. We sat through the credits. The lights came up. Everybody left but the two of us. And we weren't right next to each other. We were a few seats apart. And we just sat there staring at the screen, thinking about what we had just seen and watched. And that one is just, that'll pound you. And then since we're recording this, and it's going to be released around the holidays, one of my favorites. I have not watched it yet this year. I'll be a blubbering mess at the end of it. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. John Candy and Steve Martin. And I just, man, that story just about the human condition and kindness and compassion, and that last scene when they're, you know, going up to...
No spoilers. No spoilers.
Yeah. Well, let me start at the beginning. No, I won't do that to you, but yeah, so that's really, really good. Okay, so I know we're heading to a break here in a minute, but I want to have one more question before we do that. And how about a movie that you watched that you regret watching, and why you regret it? And this is not confession. All right, so don't think of it that way, like I'm trying to catch you guys, like, well, I snuck into a theater and I watched, you know. Let me go first. You guys look like you're trying to figure this out because neither of you have any regrets and I have many. So the movie, this is the one. It was, remember when Silence of the Lambs came out? And everybody was talking about that, and Lisa and I would talk like, "No, we're not watching that. We're not going to watch that movie. Never." I came back from a weekend trip, and it was later on a Sunday. We had on our cable a free HBO preview, which, as a cheap, poor youth worker, you want to just squeeze all you can out of that. And I sit down at 11 p.m., Silence of the Lambs comes on. And I'll watch the first 5 minutes. Well, I watched the whole thing. I mean, I was terrified. Nobody was in the room with me. I was afraid Anthony Hopkins was going to, come burst through the front door all muzzled up or, through the window. I mean, it truly played with my brain, and it was late at night, and I was tired. And I mean, it was well done, but I kind of regret that I watched it. That would be one. And then every film that Chris listed, I regret watching those.
I did see this question, so I just jotted a few, and I'll go quick. I mean, one, The Exorcist,
Ooh,
I put on there. Yeah. It's one that I kind of feel like in some ways, it's such a classic. You kind of need to watch it in some. I don't know if I can say need to watch it, but it's one of those I never want to watch again.
Yeah,
it's just disturbing. Two, when someone asks me the worst movie I've ever seen, I typically say Batman and Robin. And so I guess that might could fall into the regret category because it's just so bad. Then another one I'll list is Wolf on Wall Street, or The Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. I really like Martin Scorsese, and Leonardo DiCaprio. Love a lot of Scorsese films, and it's one of those. For the longest time, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna watch it. I'd kind of heard enough, but I finally did watch it, and definitely edited it as I went along. But it's just, utter depravity, and that's probably a regret for sure.
Yeah,
and that's no judgment if people out there. I know it seemed like someone on the Gospel Coalition even wrote an article of kind of justifying why you can watch it, because in many ways, Martin Scorsese is showing a picture of someone who destroyed themselves ultimately by this lifestyle. And so, you can argue whether or not it's glorified. At the same time, you're trying to not glorify it. So anyway.
John, that's interesting. One of the ones that I jotted down of regrets was a Scorsese film as well, The Departed. I did.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big deal. I did not like it at all. I wish I hadn't watched it.
Was that? Just refresh me on that, because they did watch it. Was that the one loosely based on Whitey Bulger up in Boston?
Yeah, in Boston, crime family, corrupt cops, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I will say that's probably one of my favorite ones.
And I get
we can disagree.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's one of the things that's fun about these kinds of discussions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But no, I can totally understand. It's a rough movie.
So, yeah.
As most Scorsese films are.
Yeah. See, that whole Whitey Bulger thing, that was going down when I was living up there. And so I can still remember on what was it, WBZ radio, was WBZ? Yeah, WBZ, which was kind of a talk radio news thing, and I'd listen to it on the way up to the seminary. It just all Whitey Bulger's name coming up all the time, Whitey Bulger, and then tracking with it. And I'll tell you about a friend of mine. His name's Duffy. I won't tell you what his last name is, but he loves that film. He loves that whole Whitey Bulger thing. And so he and I have read books. He's visited sites where things happened, and that film's one I know Duffy's watched. So yeah, don't try to guess who he is.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, don't try to guess.
His name's Duffy, but
it's
we'll
Duffy,
leave it at that.
Yeah, but
All
don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Two other movies, like just for gratuitous purposes, like afterwards, I'm like, I that was probably a mistake, but Reservoir Dogs and Boondock Saints were just two that like I felt afterwards, like, probably I probably shouldn't have watched those for different reasons. I know this will be controversial. I was forced to watch Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And I say forced, I was on a bus trip, Geneva College. They put it on the TVs on the buses, played the audio. There was no escaping it. I put that might be my most hated movie of all time. And the fact that I was forced to watch it, I know people love it. I can't stand it. Still to this day, I don't understand it. Nothing about that movie makes any sense. I really dislike it. So being forced to watch a movie you really dislike, that's a regret for sure.
Yeah, I can understand why a youth ministry major wouldn't like a film with conversions and baptisms.
Well, and that's the thing is, I like that movie, but I totally understand why you wouldn't like it. I mean, it is a very bizarre,
it's weird
movie. So it's like I don't judge you for that, because I tried to show that to my oldest 2 children and they hated it. Okay. And I'm just, I do like Coen brother movies, but some of them I just strike out on. Some of them they don't resonate with me, and some people love them, and so all that to say, I totally understand that.
All right, well,
I got to throw one more in real quick, just because I'm
telling you are giving me ammo here. That's you're loading my.
You gave me the mic.
Mike Cannon.
Keep going, Chris. Yeah.
All right. So I am a big fan of the original 3 Star Wars films, but when I watched the first 20 minutes of Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace. I turned it off. I have episodes 1 through 3, and then episodes 7 through 9. I have never seen. So I regret even watching those first 20 minutes or so, because I just wish I could leave the original 3 as they were, and I'd be happy that those 3 just stood the test of time and not be involved with the other one. So I've never watched the remaining.
Wow. So okay, just for clarity, you've seen 4, 5, and 6, and that is it. You have not seen any of the others.
Yep. The first 20 minutes of episode 1, I couldn't do it. I thought it was awful, and I'm like, nope, I need to leave things as they are. And so I've never gone back and watched any others.
Well, let me ask this, because did you see Rogue One?
No. Actually, some of those, here's the thing. Some of those side ones I have watched, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you which ones. I'm not great with names of movies. Yeah. So I don't know.
So Rogue One is excellent, and it's called a Star Wars story. So it's, breaks off from the original kind of episodic, series. And so there's a sense in which you could watch that one, even though it does tie in, to A New Hope. I wonder, I'd be curious if you'd like that, because it's really well done. It's very good.
And some of those side things, like I love the Mandalorian series. So I will allow myself to watch some other stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. So those of you who are listening who are not nerds, this is your time to get up and go to the restroom while these 2 guys chatter back and forth on this. Well, this is good. You know what I've noticed? None of us have mentioned any of the movies like Marvel and, those whole genres of the superhero movies, except for, Batman and Robin. That was the only one that was mentioned, and you didn't like it, but interesting.
That's DC.
Yeah,
That's,
DC.
Not Marvel.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Marvel, DC, comic book. Yeah, comic book.
Because I'm not a Marvel fan, and I'm not saying DC, Marvel. I get so tired of those movies. So I know that's a hot take, and I'm not trying to. I know a lot of people that like them, and but anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is good. Hey, so we're learning about opinions here, and I wonder, on what standard are we basing our opinions? And we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll get into that a little bit about how to watch movies and how to use movies in the home and use movies in our ministries. But we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Stick with us. Judson College believes that there is no greater task to call students to than devoting their lives to Christ and His mission in the world. That's why they equip students to give their lives for the cause of Christ in the church, among the nations, and in every aspect of society, and why they offer a world-class confessional Christian education at an affordable rate in a vibrant community. At Judson College, your student doesn't have to choose between their Christian convictions and a quality education. With biblical and professional training for a variety of careers and ministries, Judson College can be a trusted next step in your student's education. Visit judsoncollege.com to learn more or to plan a visit. And so we're going to keep talking here about movies. We've got John Perritt on from Reformed Youth Ministries. John, can you just say a word about RYM and a little bit about, just remind people of the relationship that we here at CPYU have with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So at RYM, we say that our mission is to reach and equip youth for Christ, that we partner with the church in her efforts to do that. RYM has been around since 1972 and started as just summer youth conferences. We've expanded from one conference to I think it's 7 now. It's like I'm forgetting because we've added a few. So all the way from California to over to Florida, Colorado, Texas, Maryland, and continuing to look at places to expand. We also offer 2 training events. We say, and I know you say this at CPYU a lot, that youth ministry isn't just ministry to youth; it's ministry to families. And so we offer a training event the last week in January every year in Nashville, and then we partner with you guys at NYMS Northeast Youth Ministry Summit. And is that the first week in March?
No, it was. We're going to go March 17 to 20 this year.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so our 3 avenues of ministry are conferences, training, and then resources. So I'm the director of resources. I oversee our written and audio material from podcasts to books. We have the track series. Walt, you've contributed to that, a student's guide to culture. Yeah, so that's, we have free Bible studies online. I always want to tell people to check those out, that we really want to serve the local church. And part of the way we do that is by giving free resources. So if you go to rym.org and look at our resource tab, you'll see Bible studies. I think we currently have 12-week Bible studies that are free to download.
That's awesome. And, I track with a lot of the online, social media, Facebook groups, of youth workers. And there's always questions about, does anybody have any resources on teaching this book of the Bible? Or what do you think about this, how I can get started in teaching my students the Bible? Of course, we push people to the Word and Youth Ministry podcast, but I always find that people are commenting on there and saying, oh, you need to go to rymonline.org and look at their free resources, their free downloads. So we recommend people do that as well. And I do want to mention, you brought up the Northeast Youth Ministry Summit. Now is the time to get yourself registered for that. You can go to nymsummit.org, nymsummit.org. It's going to be March 17 to 20 in what we call the beautiful Laurel Highlands of Pennsylvania. And they are beautiful. It'll be in Ligonier, Pennsylvania at the Ligonier Camp and Conference Center. This will be our 3rd year. And I will say this about this training event. You don't have to be obviously from the Northeast. Last year we had 21 states and 3 countries represented, ranging in age, youth workers ranging in age from 19 to, just out of high school to 77 years old. And it's been wonderful to interact with the older folks who come. And we work very hard. We've curated a really good and I would say diverse lineup in terms of the types of topics that are going to be addressed. And so it's everything from, you're working with kids who have intellectual disabilities or behavioral issues. We've got some stuff on that. How do you navigate the world of LGBTQ with your students and their parents? We've got experts coming in on that. It's just a wonderful, wonderful time. Our theme this year is Changing World, Unchanging Word. And again, John, you'll be there. And I just pulled this down. If you go onto the website, you can see all the speakers and you can see all the seminar options that are there. You're doing one on necessities of youth ministry, 9 essential necessities for, successful youth ministry. This comes out of the wisdom and experience that you have. And then a second one, a breakout on called Fostering Embodied Routines in Youth. And you want to say something about that real quick?
Yeah, so that I was able to go and be a part of the CCEF conference, Christian Counseling and Educational Foundation, which is in y'all's neck of the woods.
Oh yeah, great. They'll be there.
Right, and I said y'all, I should say you guys. Sorry, that's Mississippi.
Okay.
But I had a workshop entitled this, and so just really looking at just how disembodied the lives are that we're living, especially as we think about teens, and trying to help foster just more embodied living among teens, and really how it's connected to anxiety and depression. And so that's just a little blurb about it.
That'll be great. And the beauty of this thing, and I think you hear this when you hear John talk about what he's going to do, is there is real theological depth, there's thought, there's experience, there's great community. We work to be faithful to the scriptures, and everybody who comes, walks away going, man, this was just an awesome time. So we laugh together, we have fun. but a lot of learning. Our souls are cared for. We sit under good preaching. We worship together. And I think one of the great aspects of this is the community that's built. That was beautiful to watch the first 2 years, and we know that's going to happen again. Before I ask you about your Substack and what you're trying to do with that and how you're working to help us, I had another question. We'll have a few more as we go through this before we finish up. But have either of you guys ever met an actor or an actress? And it could be film, it could be television. I know a lot of people that are in both. Chris?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to.
I'm afraid this is going to be.
This ties into.
Is it an animated character? Is that where you're going?
No.
Okay.
My RA at Geneva College, who went on to be youth pastor, still long-time pastor in the Pittsburgh area. Before he transferred to Geneva College, he was a film major in Pittsburgh, and he has one film credit to his name. He was in. So shout out to Kevin Vinay. Like I said, longtime pastor in the Pittsburgh area. He gave me one of my first youth ministry internships, so I did an internship under him, and he was in the film as a young kid in the movie Diabolique, if you're familiar with that from the 90s. Yeah. So shout out to Kevin Vinay. He was my RA and did an internship under him. And I'll throw out an actual celebrity, if you will. I also had the chance to meet Queen Latifah, for what that's worth.
Okay.
Wow. Oh, can you tell us the context? How did you meet her?
My parents were house parents at Milton Hershey School, and she was partnering with the Hershey Company and doing some kind of, targeted sponsorship.
She came by for a visit on campus.
Came to the campus, came to my parents' student home and met all the students, and of course my parents were like, "Hey, Queen Latifah's coming to our house."
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I'll come over for dinner that night.
Yeah,
sounds like a good plan.
John, who do you got?
Yeah, this is one a lot of people are probably not familiar with, but her name is Mary Elizabeth Ellis. Because I've met celebrities, but not necessarily actors, actresses. Anyway, she's in Always Sunny in Philadelphia. She's in I just went blank, New Girl, but she's been in some films like The Free State of Jones and Masterminds, which is Zach Galifianakis and Kristen Wiig. But I've met her because I grew up with her. I went to elementary school with her, high school, church. And anyway, so I knew her prior to being a celebrity, and now she's somewhat well known, but I knew her prior to her being a movie star actress.
Yeah, that's good. So I have a few, having been older than you guys, so I've had more time to run into people. And I actually, when I was in seminary, we were living in Salem, Massachusetts. I worked at the old historic fancy hotel, the Hawthorne Inn, and so we had quite a few esteemed, famous guests come in there. You'd interact with them. One of them was, have you guys watched Call the Midwife? So the creaky elderly voice of the woman at the beginning of Call the Midwife and at the end who does sort of the narration. That's Vanessa Redgrave, and she was up there to film some movie in Salem for about 2 months, and so she stayed at the hotel, and she was not super talkative, but there was one point where she came in. She said, "I lost my key. Would you take me up and get me into my room?" So we rode the elevator together and chatted a little bit. Patricia Heaton from Everybody Loves Raymond. Our friend Steve Garber had her come and do a little talk in Georgetown down in D.C. for Christian folks, and so we got to, it was kind of like, the actor, inside the actor's studio, I guess that's what that was called. It was that kind of conversation. Stayed a little later and chatted with her. And then the other one I think of is picking up a stranded motorist in Exton, Pennsylvania, as I was going down Route 30 on rush hour one afternoon years ago. And she had kids. The car had, and I had this big van. I said, I know it sounds creepy, but I said, listen, where are you going? I'll get you to where you want to go, because the car was in the middle of the road. There was a lot of traffic. She had these little kids. We piled them all in. And she proceeded to tell me, and it was who she was, Susan Richardson, who was on the TV show 8 is Enough. And so that was an interesting conversation. And Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's fun to talk about, like, hey, who'd you run into? And you see people in airports as well. So, all right, John, tell us about this project you're on now with this Substack, because I think this is a great resource for families, and we want youth workers to know about it.
Yeah, no, thanks. So yeah, it's called Family Movie Night, Substack, and this shows how non-tech savvy I am. I tried to name the Substack that, but it's under my name, so it's johnperritt.substack.com. But I might change that eventually. But if you look up my name, you look up Family Movie Night. But yeah, I mean, movies have always been something that I've enjoyed most of my life. I was a film major for a brief point in college, and I just saw what an influential sphere this was in God's kingdom, and wanted to think a little more about it, and eventually just realized that was more of a passion than profession to pursue, and so ended up getting out of that. But the older I've gotten, the more I've been looking for resources of just kind of the complexities of trying to watch movies with your family. And really kind of what led to some of this is just having, so I have 5 children. Our oldest is 17, our youngest is 8, and trying to find a movie where all of us as a family can sit down and watch it together is a challenge. And so just kind of wrestling with some of those challenges. And then also as technology changes and the way that we're consuming movies is changing, there's so much going on. And so I just wanted to think a little bit more about that. And, I would search a little bit and find some stuff, but couldn't find just some consistent resources. And so I think it was, last April that I started just writing once a week, release something, that's related to kind of family movie night. And that's, maybe how to engage movies, practically how to pick a movie, even going through that process. I mean, having, again, 5 kids, they argue over whose turn it was and all that. So just kind of thinking practically to thinking about different genres, all that kind of stuff. And even just, again, how the way in which we're consuming movies now is changing, and how that's shaping us. And so just trying to think more about that. And really what I hope is more and more that this will become a community, because as I said from the outset of this newsletter, to continually is asking people, inviting people in on the conversation to comment, because I mean, we need to learn from each other. And as I said from the beginning of this podcast, I'm not an expert. There are so many others out there that can critique movies and think very deeply about movies that I'm just not gifted in that way. And so I rely on those people. But we need each other to kind of think through this. So that's a little bit of the hope and kind of origins of it as well.
Yeah, that's really good. What, in terms of some of the posts you've had and the topics you've addressed, are there a couple you could share with us? I know you had one recently back at the end of October related to horror movies.
Yeah.
When that's I'm sorry, I bring up like one of the most controversial things, right? But
Yeah.
that really grabbed my interest, in what you wrote there. But what are some of the things that folks will find there in terms of some of the topics and posts you put up?
Sure. What would, and just to that one, thinking of horror, and I kind of chose the month of October to kind of think more thematically about scary movies, horror movies, just with it being Halloween. And I want to give a shout out to James Harleman, who wrote the book Cinemagogue. And there's been a second edition that's come out. It's the director's cut, and so he's kind of made some modifications in there. But he was really one of the first ones to help me see and appreciate horror movies. I'm really not a fan of the horror genre. I don't watch a lot of horror movies, and he'll even say, and as we know, that there's a lot of just gratuitous violence and sex that's in those movies that we should just stay away from. But as he says, it's one of the only genres that really gets us to think about the afterlife and think about a spiritual realm. And there are definitely believers that are kind of in that realm. Scott Derrickson is one who actually directed Doctor Strange, but he's directed several, and I'm going to forget a lot. I think The Black Phone, he directed that with Ethan Hawke, and he's an outspoken Christian, and he wants to use this genre just in a God honoring way. And so I know there's a lot of pushback on horror, but um, some of the posts were just getting people to think about. Like one of them was, "It's time to scare your kids," and I definitely know each family has to be cautious in how they introduce their children to movies that are going to be a little scarier. But for us to see that, we all have this fear inside of us. We're created to fear God ultimately, and our sin redirects that to other fears. So all of our children have fears, and helping them kind of think through those and process those is helpful and important. And I try to even maybe challenge us a little bit to think about just children that were growing up in Bible times, and we think of just the story of Jesus casting demons out, and were there ever families walking around witnessing people that were possessed by demons actually in real life? And so sometimes, we can overprotect our children and we can shelter them from too much in the world. And so, is there a way to kind of slowly expose them to maybe some scarier movies? And if you look at that list of, I've got 13 scary movies to maybe watch. Some of them, one of them is animated. Monster House, which is PG, and so some of them are lighter on the spectrum of what we would say is scary. Some are not necessarily horror. James Harleman did do a guest post that month, and he has 10 horror films the Christian should consider. Some of the other posts, Brett McCracken of the Gospel Coalition wrote 10 non-cringy faith-based movies. And so, a lot of what I wanted to
That's
create
good.
on this,
I'm just non-cringy faith-based movies. I like that. Yeah.
yeah. And so that was one thing from the outset, is wanting to create lists for families that, so often when we're sitting down trying to pick a movie, just trying to think through, okay, what are some movies to watch? So coming up with lists, and I'll say this and then I'll pause so you can jump in. I mean, one of the lists that I did create is the never ending, let me make sure I get the title right, because I'm already forgetting. I cannot find it. Oh, it's not on this page. Yeah, the never ending family movie. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, the never ending family movie list. And the version is G and PG. And this is the first edition. I say first edition because we're going to continually add to it through, various points throughout the year, and just have this never ending list that families can actually download and use. The PG-13 version of that list will come out eventually. And then maybe even an R-rated version, because as I say, some families have adult children. And so as we think of families, we're not just talking about little children. So I'll stop. I've talked enough.
Yeah. And I'll just say, a lot of R-rated movies, it's not gratuitous. It's not given the R rating because it is gratuitous. It's real to life, and we know that life is broken, that it's difficult. And we always say, don't go where you can't go. Don't go where you can't go. I mean, I just said to Lisa last night, I'm done watching Yellowstone. It's just too dark. It's not at all helpful to me, and I'm not seeing anything redemptive right now. And it's, to me, I can spend my time better than sitting and getting depressed over human depravity, But so to watch together, any tips for parents that you can throw at them very quickly here before we take a break in terms of how to watch a film together?
Well, I mean, one thing I do want to throw out before I forget. So I did just create the family movie night journal. There we can link to it, and it's an actual journal that, I mean, it's through Amazon if you want to purchase a copy. It's just a way to hopefully engage with films a little bit. Not only is it, there are places to just create a list of movies that you want to watch as a family, and then a list of movies you have watched, and you can even rate those movies, and it has a place for notes. But then there's also kind of 20 questions to ask of any movie that you ever watch. There's some genre recommendations in there, and so that's one thing that's just kind of a fun thing that, as I say, in some ways it kind of can be a book that you create with your family and kind of can look back on as you have memories of watching movies. But I think just a helpful entry with as an entryway into a conversation with your children is just to ask the question, did you like it? And when they say yes or no, okay, why? And that's as simple as that. Especially with young children, just asking that question of why did you like it or why didn't you, they'll start to kind of wrestle with, okay, what was it? Is it a funny scene that I liked? Whatever. But you're starting to kind of just open the door to thinking a little more deeply with young children. And so it can be that simple, all that same.
That's really good. So practical, so helpful. And by the way, that journal, we'll include a link to that. Chris is going to link to everything that's been mentioned here. I want to throw in one more book, John, before we break, because you and I talked about this early on, and I remember the first edition. I don't know how many editions there's been now, but Brian Godawa's book, Hollywood Worldviews, is so good. And I remember there was an appendix in the first edition that it was about profanity, sex, and violence
Yes,
in film, and it actually moved from being in the appendix, if I have this right, in the second edition to being in the main body of the book itself, and that was very helpful to have a theology of that. And so, look, I'll say this. I run into, I'm not letting my kids watch any of those PG movies, any of those PG-13, any of those R-rated. I'm only going to let them watch G-rated movies. And we trust the ratings, and there are worldview elements that are far more dangerous in a G-rated film than maybe an instance of profanity or violence or sexuality that is really true to the story in an R-rated film. Yeah, we get it wrong there. So we've got to be really, really careful and do our homework. And so, that's good. That's good. I love this. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and finish up. We'll wind it down, mentioning some other resources and things, and talking about maybe how to incorporate film into our youth ministry. John, I'm sure you've got some pointers on how to show a film to students and do that without getting in trouble. I'm priming you here to answer that, and we'll talk about that when we get back. So stick with us. Be right back. We're excited to announce and invite all of our youth worker friends to join us for the third annual Northeast Youth Ministry Summit to be held March 17 to 20 of 2025 in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. This is a lively gathering of rookie youth workers, seasoned youth ministry veterans, paid and volunteer, who come together to be equipped for ministry while connecting in rich community in the beautiful Laurel Highlands of Pennsylvania. While held in the Northeast, the summit is open to everyone. Last year, youth workers ranging in age from 19 to 77 came from 21 different states and 3 countries. This year's theme is Changing World, Unchanging Word. You will receive top-notch training from seasoned youth ministry trainers and experts on how to teach the Bible, how to understand and respond biblically to cultural influences, and how to practically and effectively minister in a world full of emerging challenges and choices. To learn more, see the speakers, browse the full schedule, and to register, visit nymsummit.org. That's nymsummit.org. I hope to see you at the Northeast Youth Ministry Summit in March. Well, if you've enjoyed listening to Youth Culture Matters, not just this episode, but all the other episodes we have, we're rapidly approaching, Chris, 200 episodes, I believe, so we've quite an archive there. And you can go back, right?
This is episode 194.
194. Okay, we're getting there. We got to think about what we're going to do for episode 200. I think we ought to do 2 things for that. One, let's get Kenton back here.
Okay, that's a great idea.
And we'll pick his brain on something, because that'll be funny. And then we'll just let you go at it at the microphone. In fact, we'll push your buttons on that one.
Oh yeah, that'd be
some
fun.
of the quirks will be good. People will get to know you a little bit. The man behind all the, I would say dials, but it's behind all the screens. So, yeah. So if you've enjoyed it, give us a review. I mean, I know you hear this every podcast you listen to. Share it with people. We need that. Give it a good rating. Subscribe to it. That really helps us get the word out. And it's been a joy being able to do this particular podcast, Youth Culture Matters, over the years. And we're looking forward to many more years. So as we continue finishing up our conversation with John Perritt from Reformed Youth Ministries, he's the Director of Resources there, a good friend. Lisa and I love John. and his wife Ashley. What did I call her that one time by mistake? What, didn't I give her another name or something, Audrey?
It seems like you did on the podcast, and I
yeah, I
cannot
did.
remember.
I did. Yeah, yeah. Oh, she was mad. She was
Oh,
mad.
Man. Yeah, it was.
It was
She
brutal.
did not talk to you for a while.
No, it was bad. Yeah, she didn't talk to me from the last time I saw her to the next time I saw her, which was a couple of months. No, John and his family are great. We love them, and that's one of the great joys of working with other ministries is getting to know people who you really resonate with. And so we've shared some wonderful, wonderful times with John and Ashley, and even with their kids as well. The more we see them, the more expensive it gets because they like our chocolate treats from up here in
Wilbur Buds.
Yeah, Wilbur Buds in Lititz, Pennsylvania. My wife is always, if you can get my wife to adore you, you're in for life with treats, and the Perritt family has done that. So, okay, I got a question, film question, all right? We're coming up to Christmas. I know that this is being released in December. Those of you who are listening later, you can just listen in on this. But what is your favorite Christmas movie? Do you have one? And I'm talking about a Christmas movie that is a cultural Christmas movie, as opposed to one that is really about the gospel story and the incarnation. And I just feel horrible even saying that now that I've said it, but we've got a lot of those Christmas movies, right? They all come out. So what do you got? John, what's yours?
So are you wanting one that is like for the whole family, or
I don't care. What's your favorite? Let's not get the kids involved.
Yeah, these are hard, but I guess one that can involve the children, I think, is going to be Home Alone.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I think I've got to go with that one. There's a few others that I love and watch every Christmas season, but I'll go with that one.
I was telling Chris that I think it's Home Alone 2. Is that the one where Daniel Stern's character, who is absolutely hilarious? I mean, I just crack up at him. What's his name in the film?
Harry?
Marvin Harry.
Marvin Harry. Yeah, Harry. I think it's Harry. When he's down, he winds up falling down into the basement of the house that's being refurbished, and he goes over to the sink to turn the sink on, and Kevin has wired up, I think it's a welding machine to the faucets, and when he touches those faucets and gets the electrical charge, and you just see him, like a skeleton. I think that is, I laugh at that every time, and one of the reasons why I laugh is when my dad was living, this was years ago, he was at our house visiting around Christmas time, and we watched that. He had never seen it, and if you've ever heard my dad laugh hysterically, it is unforgettable, and he could not stop laughing. And so I was laughing both at the movie and at him, and every time I see it now that he's gone, I think about him when I watch that particular scene. But yeah, Home Alone, that's good. Chris?
My personal favorite is A Christmas Story.
Yeah.
I love it. I think, again, it's my style of humor. Unfortunately, I can't get my family members behind it, so if we're sitting down for a family Christmas movie, it's either Home Alone or Elf right now.
Okay, all right, yeah. So that's and that's a Christmas story. That's a Gene Shepherd story. Gene Shepherd was a writer, and I remember when I was in 9th grade, I had an English teacher who, and it's funny because some folks were talking about this from my high school, Mr. Lauer, who would read us Gene Shepherd stories. We would sit in class. It wasn't watching a movie. It was listening to the story while he would read it. And what's crazy is someone discovered that most of these stories he was reading were actually printed in Playboy magazine, and he was reading out of Playboy magazine sitting at the front of the class.
Serious?
Yeah. It was just for the
goodness.
stories in the articles, I guess. I don't know. But that was. So I remember him reading that. A Christmas Story. He read that. That was good.
That's a great one.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw in one that I'm kind of half embarrassed, but then I'm not embarrassed. But National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. There are some lines in there that just crack me up. And my favorite every year, it's become like a Christmas tradition for me, is when they're trudging through the snow, and they finally find the tree, and he says is perfect, and Russ looks at him, Chevy Chase, and says, "Dad, that tree wouldn't fit in our yard. It's so big, right? He says, that tree wouldn't fit in our yard. And very seriously, he says to him, let's see if I get this right. He goes, it's not going in the yard, Russ. It's going in the house. And I just think that is a really clever, funny line. And every year I just laugh at it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and then, he's trying to get the whole family to appreciate how beautiful it is. And Audrey is the daughter.
Yeah.
The mom's
yeah.
like, oh,
She's
she can't
frozen.
see it right now.
Yeah.
Her eyes are frozen.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you something about that movie that, when you watch it this year, for those who watch it this year, this is like the truth of how we have sentimentalized Christmas. And we try to have the holiday, the celebration of the holiday, actually be the thing that's fulfilling. We raise our expectations high, and it never is, because we're sinful, broken people, and, things happen. And, yeah, I mean, it never winds up being, as a dad, and I think all families know this, never winds up being as quaint and Norman Rockwell-ish as we've been, cultivated to believe it should be, and everything breaks. And certainly in that film, nothing goes right? I mean, that's what's, and it reminds us. So there is a message there that I think is powerful and good, and we need to, what fulfills is the Redeemer, Jesus Christ. So that's what we celebrate with the Incarnation. Well, John, as we finish up, some tips and pointers for families, for youth workers about watching films with kids, maybe from your own experience, how you've done this in your own home, and some of the recommendations, you're making through the Substack.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess backing up a little bit, I've been in some form of student ministry for about 20 years or so, and was at a local church for 13 years. And there was one summer we decided to do kind of a study to engage movies. And so there was, lessons we would do every Wednesday, just kind of doing some basic worldview stuff. And honestly, we used your 3D guide that you put together. Isn't it called the 3D guide?
Yeah. It's How to Use Your Head to Guard Your Heart, a 3D media evaluation guide. Yep.
Yeah.
Folks can find us. Yeah. And we, by the way, you can get those. I appreciate you mentioning that. I hadn't asked you to do that, but those are here, and youth workers are using them. They purchase one. I mean, they're what, Chris, $1.50 or something, and you purchase one for each of your students. But you're using that, right, John?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I would say, I mean, Walt and I did not discuss this at all, so he's not asking me to do this. I mean, you can get those in bulk and pass those out to students, and they can kind of use those alongside. But so I would use some of that. I would use just some other portions of scripture, and then we would watch some movies as well. But I was trying to get students to pick up on just the creation, fall, redemption, restoration narrative that you see in every single movie that you'll ever watch, and just trying to kind of train them to see that. And the end of the summer, we did watch a movie, I Am Legend, if you've seen that, with Will Smith. There's so many biblical parallels in that movie. It's just so explicit and yeah, communicated, even though it's kind of a zombie movie. Even though we've got to understand they aren't really zombies, they're humans. It says that have been poisoned with a disease that, and this sounds familiar, that makes them love the darkness and hate the light. And it's just that parallel right there. That is us with sin. And so, it's a PG-13 movie. It might have some bad language. There's definitely some scary, tense scenes, some violence because of the creatures, but, showing that to a room of, 80 students, I knew there was going to be some pushback. And so, I talked to some of our youth committee and crafted a letter of why we're watching this, what I'm hoping to accomplish. And so, getting parents on board to make sure they're okay with this. And obviously I talked to our senior pastor as well to say, hey, I just want you to be aware of this. And so there was definitely some pushback. I mean, there were some parents, and we encouraged this, but we said, if you feel like you don't want your child to be a part of this, we totally understand that. And so some parents did not allow their child to come. Some kind of pushed back a little bit on, showing them a PG-13 movie in the youth room of the church, and understand, want to be sensitive to that. But also just kind of felt like, as much as students are consuming movies, watching movies, trying to use this as a teaching opportunity. And so that was just kind of one summer where I spent some time to do this. And then, I felt like after we had that summer and we kind of had some of that worldview in place and we showed a movie, it made it a little easier in future years when we wanted to show other movies and, still giving disclaimers and things like that and letting parents know, because as you've said, well, we don't want to usurp the parents' authority and work in tandem with the parents. So, yeah, that was just one way in which I try to do that as a youth leader, and I would encourage other youth leaders to consider something like that.
I think that sounds great, and I would pile on there. I know you would add these things. Youth leaders in community watching film together, processing film together. It not only it teaches them how to do this so that they can in turn around and teach their students how to watch a film critically and Christianly, rather than just from a posture of mindless consumption. But then it gives, I think it gives us insight into this world. And, we always say culture is directive and reflective. It's a map and a mirror, and the films will mirror back to us. The Breakfast Club's a perfect example. Insights into what the struggles and heartaches, the problems, the choices, the expectations that kids have about life really opens up our eyes to those things. And then the other thing I would add is, and you've alluded to this, John, is just teaching parents how to do this, because we were never taught ourselves. We never grew up in a world where we were taught to integrate our faith into our viewing habits. It was more, there's one cuss word in there, or, her dress is too high, so we're going to turn that off. We're not going to watch that. And what we do is we miss out on really engaging with these things in ways that bring honor and glory to God. Yes, there are times where we have to turn these things off. Mm-hmm. It's too much, right? We don't belong there. And the Lord says that. But I think just in terms of, thinking critically and Christianly, it's not so much, hey, we said you're not going to watch this, although that has to happen, but let's watch it together. Let's talk about it. And that's that whole process of thinking with our kids to prepare them for a lifetime of thinking for themselves. And I would be remiss if and I know, John, you agree with this, there are things that are completely inappropriate, especially for younger children, so don't put that in front of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other suggestions you have here before we end?
Yeah, no, I think, it's definitely a gray area in our culture, that there's, issues of conscience we have to be sensitive to. We have to realize that there was a post that I had about nudity, and it was entitled "The Context of Nudity," and realizing that, the way in which it's depicted in a movie is important. I think I use the example of Schindler's List has nudity, but it's definitely not a glorifying way but we also have to think about the individual context of every single viewer, that everyone has different struggles. And so, what I hope to continue to do with this newsletter is try to wade into some of that, but then, get others, as I've said, to offer insights. And I've appreciated comments that people have made just to try to sharpen one another, because I feel like those are kind of the big three areas that we're concerned with: nudity, language, and then violence, and trying to kind of have some posts on that, just thinking about them in a little different ways. I mean, you've mentioned the MPA rating system. I've said before that caters to our inner Pharisee, that we need to be more discerning than just looking at a rating and saying no to it or yes to it. That yes, we can use it as a guide and it can be helpful, but we have to, as believers, do the difficult work of discernment and think more deeply about movies. So that's just another little thought, but I hope to continue to be able to offer these. Typically they come out every Tuesday, and my goal is to just kind of continue that. And also, as I say, not just the content of movies, but thinking about technology's influence on movies and the way that we're watching it as well. And what does that mean for future generations, and how is that shaping our children? So kind of some of those aspects of movies as well. So would love it if you subscribe to it, check it out, and offer your voice to help shape the community.
We'll put the link there to that. We mentioned Brian Godawa's book, Hollywood Worldviews. What was the other?
Cinemagog by James Harleman.
Any others you'd recommend at this point that have been helpful to you?
I like Mike Cosper's The Stories We Tell.
Okay.
Tim Keller actually wrote the foreword to that. But that's a good one that gets into television and film.
Yeah, good.
And it seems like there's another one that's escaping me at the moment, but James Harlan does have a podcast, Popcorn Theology, and so people can check that out as well.
Oh, good, yeah. And we'll include links as well for what you mentioned, our resource here, How to Use Your Head to Guard Your Heart, a 3D Media Evaluation Guide, as well as the book that I was privileged to do with you guys, A Student's Guide to Navigating Culture, which also walks them through 3 steps for understanding everything that they encounter in the soup of today's youth culture from the perspective of a biblical world and life view. So, John, thank you. Chris, thanks for pulling back the curtain on your quirkiness. And I'm joking with you, right?
Duct tape's going back on now.
Yeah, I'm joking with you, but we do get a kick out of you delivered today. So that was good. John, thank you for delivering and continuing to deliver great resources for students and for parents and for youth workers. And folks, again, check out the list at the bottom of the player for this episode at cpyu.org. Chris has put everything there for you to access with live links, and so we want to make it easy for you. Thanks for joining us, and we will catch you on the next episode of Youth Culture Matters.
Thanks for joining us for Youth Culture Matters, a podcast from the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding. If you'd like to learn more about today's youth culture, visit our website at cpyu.org. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, email us at podcast@cpyu.org.